of feedback on part one here of our final projects. I will say that I'm liking what I'm seeing so far. Some of them technically aren't, I guess, action words, more like nouns, I suppose. But overall, that's pretty minor and very nitpicky. But they're all pretty well done. I'm happy with where they're going. So we'll start here. And let me move my stuff around here. Okay. So this I really liked right off the bat. It looks very glitchy. I think that the only thing that I would, maybe not the only, but one of the things that I might do is I like how you have, your glitches going in line here. I might actually break it up a little bit more. Maybe even make it, have the bottom, try it and see if make the bottom more glitchy, if that makes sense. To have a couple more variations in it and really make it, kind of look like, I don't know, I'm dating myself here, but back in the day when you would download something and it would come down and down and down, and then like you get to the bottom and then it's all glitchy and broken up. And maybe have more of these artifacts in here, but I really like the direction it's going. If you were to have maybe more glitches at the bottom, maybe pick a bolder font, like a really heavy font, like a really wide font to use for that. I do like how you have, these overlaps of colors, kind of like when a print gets offset as well. Your color choices are really well done. It's almost got that CMYK look, except minus the yellow. But it's almost got the CMYK look, which works really well. But I think overall, just to refine a little bit, maybe a heavier font, more glitchiness at the bottom or at the top, like pick an area so that you can still read the word. But I think overall, very, very well done. All right, we'll go here. This one's pretty simple, but can be really effective, I think, with some tweaks. I see what you were doing, kind of creating a microphone here. It almost sort of looks like a headset microphone. It might almost be a little bit too simple. I might look at some of your font choices, maybe pick a little bit more of an expressive font, work on some kerning, either go really wide or a little bit tighter in spots. Maybe even try to have this look more like a microphone rather than just a dot on the G. I think it's a pretty good start. Maybe even seeing if you can get make it look like the S is opening up for like a mouth or something like that, and having the microphone be, more of a handheld mic down at the bottom here, something like that. Even if you had the N kind of opening up and singing into the microphone here, so you could tilt that N a little bit. Something like that, and having it be a little bit more expressive and a little bit more detailed in your illustration. But I think overall, a very good start. This one is really well done. I really like the font choice. I think it works super, super well. The overlaps of the target here with the T and the O, I think work really well as the second O. To sort of nitpick it, I might see if I can add either like a bullet or something what's being shot in your shoot here. Maybe in part of the H, I was thinking if you had some movement in here, you could break it up and have like a bullet head here as the cross character for the H, and then emphasize really that breakup. Even if you had it go across into the O, maybe that might be pushing it a little bit, or have the head of the bullet come here and then maybe movement lines as part of the H, to give it a little bit more movement. But I think overall this is really well done. A great use of font. And a relatively simple approach, but very effective. Again, I like the positive, negative. Maybe even expand this a little bit more so these cross over a bit more, really kind of push that a little bit. But I think overall, really well done. And here is our melty effect. I like where this is going. Again, pretty much with all of these, but again, I would really try to push it. For this one, I might, again, go with a heavier font, maybe a thicker font, to really have this kind of look like it's pouring down. I think you have a really good effect here with some of the characters where it's on the bottom, and especially on the T here. Maybe even have a little bit more, but maybe have these. Oops, I'm trying to zoom in here. Like these here, maybe have them like pointed down a little bit more, like a drip. You kind of have it going here. A drip will sort of like taper in almost like a half a teardrop kind of, or like a, I don't know if I can do it really quickly, but have like a, have more of like those typical teardrop shapes, but on, half of them. So it's instead of, it looks kind of like it's going to the right here, and here it looks like it's kind of going to the left. If you have these separately in your working file, even just turn them a little bit. So the bottom is about here, so the bottom meets up, if that makes sense here. So even like rotate these 15 to 25 degrees, give or take. So it looks like it's really rolling down the side of your text, rather than kind of going right, left. Again, I really like how you have it, in some of the areas here. I might give it a little bit more variation too. It's a little bit uniform. You kind of have the same effect here, and clearly the same ones here. And on the D and the T, I might push that a little bit, give it a little bit more size variation, and maybe a little bit more. You have a couple here which are cool. Maybe have a couple that are rolling down the sides here. Even push this, the bottom of some of these words, or some of these characters rather, so they look like they're melting. Some of the L, you don't have to do it on all of them, but like on the leg of the M here, give it a little bit more variation. I like how you have the sort of frosted effect here, and then you have the stroke, so you don't completely lose your shape of the letters. I might push that a little bit more. See how it looks, because it kind of loses, if you back out a little bit, it kind of loses a little bit there. You might want to increase that stroke just a tiny bit, or just do like a solid stroke instead of, I'm not sure how well it'll work, because you have the gradient, rather than a gradient, a solid stroke, or push that gradient a little bit. But I think overall, it's a good start. A little bit more variation, etc., etc. Back out a little bit here. This one, I'm not really sure where you're quite going with it. As far as, I know with the word, obviously, but as far as where you want to the sort of spearheaded to be, I was kind of thinking, let's move that out of the way, trying to think of where you could even incorporate the spear if you wanted, your spear to be part of the H. Obviously, as my illustrator's flipping out here, let me group this. As far as, you'd have to push it a little more, maybe break apart your word a little bit more. Here we go. To have that, obviously you would have to, obviously adjust that a little bit, but have that, be the leg of the H, or even the P coming across. This one needs a little bit more work than some of the other ones. You need to decide what your action is going to be, essentially. Like if it's going to break through the word, you can even have the spear come, attached from one letter and break through across your word and literally break it up. But I think that would be, this would be a good start-ish, as incorporating your illustration more into your word rather than just like an object kind of on top of it. So I think you kind of just need to decide where, where your action is going to be, what your action is going to be, and how it's going to affect your word and affect your characters. But I would say try to incorporate it into your characters a little bit more. Maybe try different fonts. Try more, a heavier, bolder font rather than this is sort of a little bit more elegant. Maybe if you want to go with a harder, bolder font, things like that would be good starting points to work on for that. And then we'll go to our twist here. Again, I like where this is going. I think I feel like this is sort of more of a warp rather than a twist. If there was a way for you to sort of, even if it was just a couple of the characters or starting from the middle, where you had, I'm doing it with my hands, you can't see that, where you had like maybe starting from the center with the I and the ST spiraling in one direction, and then the TW sort of spiraling in the opposite direction, kind of like you're wringing out a towel from the middle, like that kind of twist. So it looks more like a twist rather than like this sort of linear warp that you have going on. But I think it would be a pretty good start. A capital I might be good to build off for that twist. But again, if you kind of had it going in like opposite directions, and you might have to warp each individual letter, break it apart, and warp it as each individual letter. So you have one going one direction, one going the other direction. I'm thinking more like wringing out a towel kind of thing. Or if you had like a twist in sort of like, look at illustrations of like a orange peel twist or like a lemon twist, things like that. Even like a kind of like a slinky idea. Something like that, like look at illustrations of that to try to get an idea of how you can sort of get that twist action in there. All right, going to this one. I like the effects that we have going here. Again, I feel like a little less of an action word. But if you wanted to make it sort of more of an action, I really like the background you have going on. I think it works well. It's almost like I get this sort of literature, in the greater Bangor area with Stephen King. I think it's pretty fitting. I'm thinking might be a little bit cliche, but if you could do maybe a little bit more of this texture, or if you wanted to do... I was trying to think if your action could be almost like a shivering, like a shake. If you had kind of like the glitch, if you had like a bit of a tremble effect going on, or if you wanted to have like one of the O's, it might be kind of cheesy. It might not work, but if you wanted to have one of the O's screaming or something like that, if you had this sort of like shock, it's kind of like shocked, almost facial expression in it, or if you wanted to give it sort of more of a tremble, like an actual vibration kind of effect going on, I think it would work really well with the background and push your word a little bit more to give it sort of more physical action. I think that might be kind of cool to play around with. All right, and then Amir had a few. I'm going to talk about one or two. I just wanted to show you. He has this vintage here. 3D here. Flip book. And chalk. So I'm going to talk about the flip book and the chalk. The chalk, I liked the effect you had going. It was a good use of brushes and stroke work. I think if you were to use this one, I would think maybe, again, sort of, think more of an action word rather than, chalk is just kind of like the object, obviously, that you're writing with. So think of like an action word that might go along with it. If you wanted to do like an erase, I really like the effect you have going. If you wanted to do sort of like an erase and have like a fade, like it looks like you're, old school chalkboard erasing this could be your action word. But I think overall, you have this really good effect with some of the, what looks like remnants in the background and the brushwork. Rather, the brushwork works really well. I think maybe just choosing a different word and then maybe adding an action to it. You could have, like, again, I said erase and have it look like you're actually starting to erase it or erase from the bottom, that kind of thing. And then I liked the flip book. I liked how simple it was. I might adjust this a little bit because usually a flip book doesn't literally flip like this. Like if you think of like the old school kind of like animation where you're kind of like thumbing through a book, you could have it almost on different pages if you had it more linear. Just gonna mess around with your file and break it here. So if you had this sort of similar idea, but you had like one letter on each page, kind of. So if you thought about it like that, as I'm breaking this all apart here, let's ungroup. So you could have this like similar idea, but have it be, because it's, it loses some of the, it loses some of the effect here. So if you had, not to do your whole thing here, but just to kind of show you the idea. If you had this kind of flip book, and you had these on different pages, obviously you'd have to make them a little bit bigger, a little bit more overlappy. It's a technical term. So if you had them overlap a little bit more to where they looked like they were actually flipping, kind of like that similar effect that you had with your other pages. So you kind of had them look like they were on top of each other, sort of flipping, and arrange them. Think of like that old school animated, as I'm sort of animating it there. This similar look. Even if you wanted to have it be, this still vertical, I like that, but have it be, FLIPBOOK instead of the word flipped back and forth. But I really like the idea that you have going here, and you can push that as well. Going on to this one, I like this idea. Again, we have a sort of similar thing to the melt idea, which is totally okay. You're going to have some parallel thinking with these projects. I think as far as this one, again, like I've said with most, is maybe pushing a little bit more. It's a little bit uniform. Maybe making it look a little bit less uniform with the blood drips. I might try to see if you can get some spatters in there, play around with some brushes. There's probably some good artistic brushes. If I can open up some brushes, there's probably some good artistic brushes you can get. Let's see. I think that might be mine built in, but you can see if you have that one. But even like some bristle brushes might be helpful. Even as I'm opening all sorts of stuff. Some paint or watercolor brushes. You can get some really sort of unique, I'm going to cough, some sort of more, obviously it's going to kind of stroke that way, but, not necessarily, you get the idea. But there's definitely going to be, you'd have to look into your brushes there to see what kind of, under the artistic brushes, maybe even some of the ink brushes, some of the paint brushes, some, I don't know about the scatters, probably not so much, maybe. You can even pull some of these in. Yeah, definitely not that. It's a little bit of like party confetti we have going on here. But you get the sort of general idea of some of these. Well, those are a little bit more uniform, but you know what I mean. So looking at playing around with some brushes, again, maybe going a little bit more non-uniform with your drips. If we could, incorporate some spatters in there, maybe like some blood spatter in the background, that kind of thing. Again, I'm sure you could find some brushes within Illustrator, even outside of Illustrator. You guys are welcome to even download brushes. There's plenty of free brushes available online to check out. If you can install them on your machine, they're pretty easy to add to your collection there. But I would say, again, a good start. I might choose, I like the font. I feel like if you're going to go with this font, maybe, again, do some more warping, do a little bit of warping to your letters as well. Maybe just like a light, I don't even know. A bulge probably isn't going to be exactly what you want, but, if you were to play around with the bulge a little bit here. I don't know why it's not previewing. There we go. Now it's going to preview. So if you wanted to play a little bit, that would help with your uniformity. Again, giving it a little bit less uniform look for your letters, things like that. If you wanted to play with those. All right, let me close these out. And then, oops, I went to the wrong one here. All right. Again, a really nice, simple, effective use of literally breaking this apart. I like kind of how you have the B unaffected. I might actually push that a little more and see where, if you can kind of have like a point at where things break. If you wanted to have the B and the R and like part of the R start to kind of fall off, and then the rest of the letters, I kind of like how you have this movement going from left to right, but you kind of have this arc thing going on. I know this is just kind of like a fun illustration, but to have them sort of make sense a little bit more. But if you wanted to have, the B, again, like maybe here's your breaking point, and then you have the letters start to trail off, or even go non-uniform. If you wanted to have, I have a tendency to pull people's assignments apart here. I'm just going to lock that. So if you had, the B and the R, you kind of had this, this breaking point there to kind of play around with. So I just messed that up. But you get the idea, have this sort of like where the shatter point is coming from, to give it a little bit more of sort of planned movement, if that makes sense, rather than random movement. Maybe to push that area a little bit more. But I really like to start. Again, it can show you like some really simple techniques to illustrate an action very easily or very well. So the scatter, we have a really good start here. I think we might be going too simple. I might try using a different font, maybe using a little bit more playful font. If you want to have something to look like it's scattering, play with your sizing maybe. If you want to have things like look like they're going off in the distance. If you want to have it like trailing from left to right or right to left, etc., or having them go, back from the right and left into the center. But I would definitely play around with your sizing. Play around with maybe a little bit of warping, some dimension. Definitely add some dimension, maybe some shadows, like if it was like an animal or a pest or something that was scattering. Definitely play with your sizing a bit, give it a little bit more variety to make it really look like something is scattering, give it a little bit more depth, a little bit more dimension. And I would absolutely suggest playing around with the font as well. If you wanted to, your font choice can really give you either sort of a playful look or a more serious look, things like that. So font choices, a little bit more affecting your characters and with size and dimension, even shadow, etc., to really push this one forward a bit more. Again, a fairly simple, really effective use of techniques here to illustrate something pretty simple. I like how you have, I'm just going to lock this. I like how you have this offset a little bit. I might push that a little bit more. You know, push that a little bit more. Even maybe adding, you know, depending on how the slice happened, even adding that, you know, I'm thinking, for those that might be familiar, I'm thinking like Fruit Ninja, those games kind of like that, where if you had this, you know, an actual line, you know, this sort of action line, cutting across this, oops, let's do that, you know, cutting across this is, you know, quick and dirty, but you get the idea. You know, cutting across your line, I don't know if you did try this or hadn't tried that. Giving it, obviously you don't want to have it be a gradient on there. I'm just going to go with the white just to show it. But, you know, if you had this kind of an actual line slicing it, may or may not work if you refine it a little bit more. But I do really like the idea of you having this shadow and a little bit of an offset there. Oops, this is all over the place. A little bit of an offset there really pushes it back, which is really nice. The gradient against this solid color. You know, even if you wanted to have just the, you know, you could add, if you wanted to pull, I don't know if this will work per se, but if you wanted to pull, not necessarily. I was going to add, let's add a point, zoom in a bunch. We'll add a point right behind there and then go back to our point here. You know, if you kind of wanted to add, obviously you'd have to go a little bit further than I just did, but you know, if you wanted to kind of add that sort of look, it may or may not work well for you. To give that line, instead of having a line straight across, as I'm using my hands again, you can't see that. If you wanted to have a line go straight across, this way it looks like, you know, just sort of the tips of these letters were cut to give it a little bit more action, sort of, rather than just like the after of what had happened. But again, I do really strong start here. I really like the, you know, simple use of gradient and color and a little bit of breakup to illustrate your word there. I think again, like the chalk one, I think we have more of an illustration here, less of actually illustrating the action. If you can incorporate, you know, the drawing, if you wanted to have like the eye be the pencil that's actually like drawing the rest of the word, or, you know, make some of the characters in your word that are actually drawing. I think we have, you know, a good illustration here, but it's just that. It's an illustration with a word and some art that represents more the tools than the action. So I think maybe focusing a little bit more on the action and how we can get our characters, you know, our characters, meaning the text, the characters to draw a little bit. You know, again, a suggestion could be having the eye, you know, be the pencil, and having that, you know, having it draw a line, even something relatively simple, or have it look like it was drawing some of these shapes you have in the background, etc., etc. I would think going back to your shear assignment, you know, think about how the shadow casts. You know, your shadow is kind of off. It works for some of the letters, but it's off for quite a bit of the other letters. If you want to have it actually look like it's casting a shadow, then you need to really push that. So think about some of the techniques that we've learned earlier in the semester to kind of push what you're doing there, really more illustrate the word rather than just have artwork that represents the word, if that makes sense. And then lastly, for part one, burning, we have another good example, I think. A couple minor things. I like the idea of having, the cigarette smoke as like this burning. Although you have the smoke coming from the wrong, so this would be the filter, I guess, and then maybe this would be the ash. So I would have this flip. So it's more like that. Oops, as I forgot your the rest of your illustration. And again, I would push, maybe push that a little bit more so it's larger, so you definitely see it. So you definitely see what's going on here. Make it look more ashy. Even if you had, let's go back to here. I'm going to flip this around. I'm not going to save this, but I'll flip this around. Okay, so even if you wanted to have it look like, the burning was coming from, maybe even have like this cigarette portion be bigger. I know I'm sort of wrecking your illustration here, but if you wanted to have your cigarette portion be bigger and have, maybe the B and the U look like they're part of the ash burning down, and then have the smoke effect from the R starting to come up and starting to have that be the smoke carrying through here. I like what you have with the I and the N. I would be careful though stacking them like that. I would push if you wanted to have them stacked. As I ungroup it, I would push maybe have. Oh, I'm having trouble selecting these here. There we go. Anyway, I would have maybe this N. Be more. More in front of the I, push that I, I like the overlap, but push the I so it's not so on top of each other, if that makes sense. But I was thinking maybe having the B and the U start to more incorporate with the sort of cigarette illustration you have going on here. So it kind of looks more like, the smoke coming up from the cigarette. I think, you have a really good start here. I just think some of your sizing could use some work. I think, use this space, have this, having the cigarette be bigger and maybe even flipped would sort of give more action to have your eye lead around your illustration. It doesn't have to be, exactly, use some positive and negative space, but, give yourself some more space. Really use that space that you have rather than having this really small, go way back, there we go, having this very small cigarette. When you back out a little bit, you can see the burning pretty well, but the cigarette kind of almost doesn't look like a cigarette per se, that small when you back out. So I would work on your sizing, maybe work on incorporating that effect you have going into the ash of the cigarette. But I think overall, very, very strong start. So that wraps up part 1, and then we'll have part 2 and 3 feedback coming up. And overall, really good starts with all of these, and I like where these are headed.